All right. We're live, I think, anyway. What's up, everyone? If anyone's joining us live, let us know in the chat. How's it going on a Monday? And I'm pretty super excited to start doing some live streams and yeah, talk a little bit about what I was thinking, some of the thoughts behind it, what's going to go on, and yeah, just share the space with you guys. So I'm super excited. I've got this whole live stream set up that I've labored over. So if any of you guys out there have tried to set up a live stream with your DAW and like lighting and all that stuff, it can get pretty intense in terms of a rabbit hole. So finally got some stuff going up. I got some different angles so we can see my face here. When we start doing some music stuff, we can look at the dock and look at Ableton, talk about that. Also got the hands, got the overhead camera, right? How awesome is that? So I'm gonna talk about music theory, playing stuff. When we get in the zone, start showing you this shot. Then I got like a worldly, like, whoa, when we start whipping out guitar and we're jamming out, that other shot just for fun. And I might use that one to move around. And then for the heck of it, I got another shot so that when we're doing the screen, you get the side profile. You feel like you're sitting right beside me in the studio. And that's a huge reason why I want to do this. So let's go back to the face, is get a more direct connection with people who want to learn music production and want to share ideas, expand their thinking, expand their mind, talk about their music, and just have that immediacy of sharing the process as we go along and doing it live, and just be more authentic myself as well. So as I go along the process, sharing what I'm learning, share how I approach things, sharing all the mistakes and the ups and downs, and kind of go through the journey together. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. And part of that as well is as we go through these live streams, it's going to give us a chance to answer questions. So if you have any questions about producing music, about recording, editing, mixing, learning a processor, learning music theory, playing an instrument, genres, whatever it is, I'm here to answer your questions along the way. So feel free to drop any questions at any point in time. I also have a bunch of questions that I've loaded up here for later as well. And the other thing as well is as we do this, and if you have any ideas for what we're working on, feel free to chime in. Like, we're here to have some fun and collaborate on whatever we're working on. So I want to make this a fun experience for both myself and you guys. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. So yeah, if you're live, let me know in the chat that you're here and you can see and hear me. Hopefully this is all working and my computer doesn't blow up. So yeah, so what I was thinking to do is to start off is if someone's live here and you have any questions or you want to share something, let's have a conversation. But I wanted to kind of talk high level about what I want to be doing with these live streams. So the goal for me is to be live streaming most days. So I'm going to try and live stream every weekday for an hour or two. We'll see how it goes. And really just share the process that I've developed for myself and that I'm continuously iterating on and learning, but also what I teach my clients and my students, and just share the process. Just go through it, talk about it, get some ideas going from whoever's here live and share the experience around it. And I wanted to do it in a way that was just authentic. Like I'm not going to be pre-rehearsing stuff. I might make mistakes. I might go down rabbit holes, but that's part of the fun, right? So I kind of wanted this to be that kind of fun adventure. And yeah, what we're going to kind of be using is this framework that I've started developing. And it's basically a model of the creative process. So if you've been doing this for a while, you may or may not have a creative process that you typically do, whether you've thought it out or whether it's just come naturally to you. But usually there's going to be kind of a sequence or a way that you work through the various stages of making music, right? Because to make music, there's a bunch of hats that we wear in the modern production age, right? We have to come up with ideas. We have to write ideas, pick the best ones. Once we have a kind of a rough song together, make a compelling arrangement, tell a story with it. If we're recording other artists, then we're working with recording drums, recording vocals, programming beats, MIDI. And then from there, we're editing those things, we're mixing those things, we're even mastering those things on top of marketing and promotion, all that stuff. So there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to do, but that's part of the beauty of it, isn't it? So in my experience, a little background on me is like I went to school for audio engineering in 2012 or 2013, like that year. And I learned all of the technical stuff, right? Like the physics of sound, how sound works physically, how it reacts in space, like understanding diffusion and like acoustics and reflections and all that stuff, how a room is set up, how to mic up instruments, how to use a console, all the processors, listening for frequency, like all that technical stuff. And I thought that that would be the way that I would be able to then produce the music that I wanted to produce. Like I wanted to make music that sounded just as good as some of my favorite artists, and like some of the records that I listened to growing up that really blew your mind away with like the sonic quality and the aesthetics and just the artistry. And I really wanted to express myself that way. And I really thought that going to school and learning all the stuff would be the answer. And don't get me wrong, I learned a ton and it was super useful, and it's the foundation of then being able to do all this stuff. But I realized that I didn't learn anything about the creative process itself, like how to manage getting ideas from your head into the software or onto an instrument and going from there all the way to a finished product. There's a lot of ebbs and flows that we have to go through, a lot of different roles we take on, a lot of different types of thinking that we have to go through. And this led me to research this a lot. Like, what is this creativity? Like, how does it work? Like, is it all mysterious and you can't know? Or is there phases to it? Is there a way to approach it? And in looking through various things like winemaking, sculpture, my dad's a sculptor. You might see some of these sculptures. Let's see, wait, over there. You see that? See those sculptures? My dad did that. And he's amazing. And my mom painted that. Like, awesome stuff. But in any art form, you'll see, even running a business, coming up with an app, there's like stages of development throughout the creative process, right? And there's like parts where we're like ideas, like, oh, this could work, that could be, oh, I want to make this, I want to do that, like dreaming stuff up. And then there's another phase of more convergent thinking. It's like, okay, now I actually have to make this happen. And that's going to be largely dictated by like your skill set, what you can do, how quickly you can transmit ideas, how you're feeling, all that stuff. And then there's also emergent thinking, which is more like editing, right? Where you're like listening back to your song, you're like, does this actually work? What is this missing? You know what I mean? Like, how can I make this better with editing? And all of these types of thinking and combinations thereof really have different phases. And we kind of want to not mix those roles up because, for example, if you're like trying to create and edit at the same time, it's like putting the gas and the brake on at the same time. And it's inevitable that we're going to get frustrated, right? We're going to start judging our ideas too early. We're going to start getting down on ourselves. We're going to be like, oh, this song isn't working. I don't like this. I'm going up and down, instead of kind of having a framework, a flow, to be able to interact with your music in many different ways so that you can really focus on these roles for the time that they should be focused on, right? And go back and forth. So the whole thing is to not have a formula. Like, this isn't an equation. Like, some people will teach music as an equation. Like, if you want to make deep house, or if you want to make like deathcore, follow this exact structure. This is how you EQ the drums. This is how you structure the song. And like, that's useful to learn. However, in art, you want it to be more flexible for what you want to do, right? Because what you're going to want to do in yourself as an artist is going to ebb and flow and change over time. So you're going to want a system or framework that like builds that in so that you can shape it and refine it as you go. So that's kind of the background as to this thing that I've been working on. And you'll see that when we go through this, and we'll talk about it, is like, you'll see this in every step of the process for music production, but in so many different things in creating something, right? Because in creating something, there's going to be all of these steps, and you'll see it again and again. So that's what we'll talk about to start. Again, if you have any questions about this process, let me know. But let me just pop up. I have this system, and I have this awesome thing called Notion, which, if any of you guys like task management stuff, like systemizing things, Notion is the place to go, because it's like this fusion of spreadsheets and docs, but in this really cool way that you can like modify it and build your own things within it. So the best way for me to explain this thing is to just show it to you. And let's look at this process real quick. And this is what we're going to be going through in these live streams, and I really want to just be the guinea pig. Like, I've been using this for a while. I really want to test it. I want to lead from the front. I want to shape it and develop it, because as we move forward, we'll see that there's holes in things, or there's like situations where this doesn't work, or that kind of stuff. So I want to like be aware of that to bake it in as we move forward. And yeah, just so this is what it looks like. So if we go over here, this is the workflow wizardry system. And let's see if we can get to this view. All right, so right here, I got a bunch of different things in here. But if we just look at these 7 steps, all right, clarify, flow, extract, compose, edit, mix, and master. That's what I have named these steps. They can be named anything. I just think that this was very, what's the word? Like congruent with working with music. So let's talk about these steps a little bit. Okay. So again, these steps are not linear. Like, this isn't supposed to be a thing that's one step into the other, into the other, into the other, into the other, until the final product is made. It can be like that, but most cases it's not going to happen like that. And you don't have to necessarily start at the beginning, right? Like, you already have a song idea. Like, if you're a guitarist or pianist, you might already have a chord progression. Then you already have some ideas to start with, or you might have a song arranged already or something. But each of these phases will be required at some point in the process. And there's a reason behind them all, because they all require kind of a different form of thinking. So let's start at the beginning. So clarify. So if I actually open up one of these cards, let's just move this one here, and it updates to clarify. So that's nice. Let's pop this open. I can tell my computer's like getting maxed out with this stream. So let me know if it's actually working out there. But yeah, within this whole system thing, we won't get into the system, but these are kind of the questions I ask myself around this. So this is all about gaining clarity as to what you want to be doing, as well as calibrating your system. So calibrating what you're working with, tuning your instruments, you can think of it that way, but also putting limitations in place. Okay. So one big thing that is an issue with modern music production is that we have too many options, especially in the digital medium. We can change everything, right? Like, you can edit anything, you can change out samples, you can like swap out sounds forever, different synth patch, different effects. Like, you can change things forever and ever. And if you don't commit to anything, you can get lost in options, option overwhelm. Like, you're just like, what do I do? There's infinite things to do. I'm overwhelmed. And the whole idea of this first phase is like, on top of getting clarity on what you want to actually be doing with an idea or with your song, or what intention you have, like what is it that you want to create, and calibrating your system, you're also putting in limitations. So we can get into this later, but I'm just going to go over the idea behind this. And again, you want to just visualize and affirm what you're trying to do. So like for me personally, for example, with my music, I play in a rock band, prog rock band, which is amazing, keeps me sharp. It's like fun, odd time signatures, crazy stuff. But I've been getting into more electronic stuff, and Ableton, of course. And I really want to get a fusion of like guitar music. So using my skills, because I'm a guitarist, but also fusing it with like down tempo and like cool things you can do in Ableton, and not necessarily stick to the traditional rock format, and like have different kind of drums, hip hop drums, synth bass lines, whatever it is. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And the reason I share this is that it can be useful to think about what you want to be doing, right? Maybe you're still learning, that's great, but like, what are you trying to learn? Are you trying to get this kind of genre done? Or do you want to like create your own genre? Or do you want to finish a certain amount of things? Like, it can be a very practical thing, or it can be more of a creative goal, right? Whatever you feel. So to me, it's like, what I would like to do throughout these live streams is like iterate and develop the setup that's going to allow me to make that music in a fun live way. So that's a big part of it, but also get enough output out there so I can start to like create a style that I feel is good. And we'll get more into that, where quality and quantity have a very interesting relationship. And a lot of us, me included, I've done this for years, is like, we put so much pressure on ourselves to like make an amazing song and like perfect it, and I'm gonna make this happen. And like, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of goodwill there, there's a lot of mental pressure, and sometimes that can actually work against us, versus like, all right, we're going to make 10 tracks and we're going to pick the best 2 or 3, right? Then it's like you're not putting so much pressure. Hey, awesome. What's up? Parodine. I hope I'm saying that right. Thanks for chiming in. I'm glad this is actually working. It was a heck of a thing to set up, but yeah, great. I'm glad that it's clear, and we'll get into some audio stuff in a bit. Yeah, but thanks for joining, man. Let me know if you have any questions that come up as we talk about this stuff. So yeah, a huge thing about getting this kind of vision down is that like it limits the options, right? It kind of sets the parameters from which you can work within, and it just gives you that much more freedom. So again, so like putting too much pressure on yourself to perform on one track that you're working on, it's like, don't worry about it. Like finish 10 tracks and pick the best 2, because working in that way and thinking of that way releases the pressure we put on yourselves. And also it's going to make way better music, because the 2 tracks out of 10 are going to be significantly better than if you just focused on one, which is like a very interesting idea to talk about. So the other thing about this step is you want to kind of set up your band. Okay, so determine the required instrumentation. And I like to think of this as in 4 elements. That's what I teach. And I just love everything about like ancient alchemy and old school esoteric ways of looking at the world. And I really just, I've always loved like the 4 elements. Like I was super into like Pokemon and types and video games, like all that shit. I love it. And anyway, 4 elements. Think of rhythm, bass, melody, and dynamics. Okay, and if you can have just those 4 things, keep it simple. Let's not go complicated. Get those 4 things into your DAW and really design them to be instruments. Okay, so for example, and you might be telling yourself like, hey, I don't play an instrument, like I program anything. It's all good. You can still do that, but there's still some value in this. So for example, if we look at a guitar, right? Okay, any instrument, but I'm gonna take guitar because I love guitar. This one looks sick. But a guitar, when you think about it, okay, it's an instrument that has built-in limitations. Okay, so we can play a certain amount of notes on this thing. Okay, there's like 3 or 4 octaves of notes, and you can play certain notes at the same time by strumming multiple strings. There's like specific things you can do on a guitar, like hammer on and pull offs, right? You can do like slides, you can do pick bends, you can bend notes up and down. All that kind of stuff is built into this instrument as it is. So like this instrument is already designed, and that's a good way to think about it, because let me just put this down. It's a good way to think about that, or even a piano, right? Like a piano, it has limitations. It has probably the least limitations because it's very, you can create all these crazy voicings with all your all your fingers and like all that stuff, but it has limitations within it, like the way you play it, how it generates sound, all those kinds of things, the way you can articulate yourself on it. And you want to think of those as archetypes for when you're designing your band, right? Because you want it to be something that has a lot of width, like it's a narrow thing that has a lot of things you can explore within it, right? So when you design your instruments, add effects, add modulators, add whatever it is. And even if you just have a tiny little MIDI controller, you're going to be able to generate ideas that you would have never been able to program. And then if you're like a programming wizard, you can add that in at a later phase, right? But I do invite you to explore this part of yourself, because there's something about getting into flow state, right? I'm sure you've all have felt that when you get in the flow and you're playing something and it's just like time escapes yourself and you're in the moment. Those magical moments is where the magic can happen, right? So again, yeah, design those instruments for maximum range of expressiveness and playability. So when you're designing an instrument, right, like even if it's a synth patch, like it can't hurt to throw 2 or 3, 4 macros to be controlling the filter, to be controlling the send to a delay sound, to be having a reverb, right? To maybe have an arpeggiator that turns on when you want it as you're playing live, right? And really being thoughtful and just intentional ahead of time to have fun and build the stuff ahead of time before getting into making ideas will save you so much time. I can't even express it, because you're going to have these instruments that are designed to be creating a bunch of crazy different ideas and getting experimental and having fun, as opposed to, I'm sure most of us have gone through this, where you like load a track, you come up with a drum beat. You're like, what's going to fit on this drum beat? Then you scroll through presets. Then you load another preset. You're like, oh, this is kind of cool sound. And then you get some other layer that works with the drum beat. And you're like, okay, what's going to work next? And it's super fractionalized thinking. You know what I mean? Like it's very like on, off. Oh, I need this there, as opposed to, let's say you have 4 instruments that are designed, you have some instruments, and you're like, I'm just going to create as many ideas as possible, and I'm not going to look at the screen. I'm not going to menu dive unless you know it's something that's not going to take you out of flow state. And we'll get into flow state in a bit. So again, that's the idea of the first phase. And there's a balance here, right? Like if you want to get super crazy with it, like you can like set your effects, you can set your tempo, you can set your time signature. Like I'm working in 3/4, I'm going to work in D Dorian, we're going to be in D sharp. Like you can get super like down with it, but you can also be like, I don't really know those things yet. I'm just going to work with whatever idea comes first, and I'm going to experiment as my intention. That's totally fine, right? The whole key is just having an intention in the first place. All right, so the next thing, let me move this card to flow. So, oh, I think I broke the system, guys. So if you click this thing in the system and you go to flow, boom, magic, it moves. Gotta love that, right? So next one is flow. So let's talk about flow, and let me know if you've had any experiences with flow state in music or outside of music, right? Where you're like out of body experience, you're like aware, but you're not consciously thinking, you're just completely immersed in the thing you're doing. Most of us have experienced flow state, and that's the next phase. Okay, so this is on the backpack of the last phase, where we've kind of designed instruments, we've set some intentions, we have limitations. You only have four things, right? Rhythm, bass, melody, dynamics. Don't worry, we can always add more stuff later, but we're keeping it simple for now. But you've designed those things to have extra effects, to be playable, to have fun with, all that good stuff. And now we're going to shift the intention to now just creating ideas. And as you're programming these instruments or finding tones or whatever it is you're using, you might come up with ideas as you're designing it, which is great. Record it at the same time, but just hold back from going all in until you do the pulling back of the arrow, so to speak, in the first phase, right? And this one is really releasing the arrow. It's like, let's get creative now, let's get messy. And the whole idea of this is to like create as many ideas as possible without judgment. So this may be tough for some of us. I know this has been tough for me, where I'm almost a perfectionist and I really want to fix things right away. Or if I hear something I don't like, I really judge it quick. But this is the time to really push that aside and tell your internal editor that yes, we will have time to edit this and fix all this later, but for now we're focused on creating. And I can't express how useful it is to be doing something like that, right? Because you allow yourself to just let go and see what happens. So again, yeah, following this step is like embody the music and engage in flow state, right? Explore different vibes, ideas, motifs through a jam session. Like let yourself just play with the things and see what comes up. Like a child, right? Like a child isn't going to think about what they're going to make. They're going to just play, right? And we want to kind of tap into that because that's important. Again, no judgment on your ideas and no fixing. You're not allowed to go edit things unless it's like totally distracting you from flow state. But like if it's a little bit off, don't worry. Just focus on the next thing. Focus on the next thing. Focus on something else. Play with something else. Just like completely going into creator mode, right? And then the key to this is recording everything, right? So in Ableton, if we go to Ableton over here, like we can record everything within clips, which is super useful if you're using Ableton. If not, you can do something like in the timeline where you're just recording everything all at the same time and you're switching your MIDI controller and you're just like coming up with ideas. You can find a way to make it work, but I just use Ableton. Yeah, and that's stage 4. So stage 1 is like, okay, we're going to set some stuff up. We're going to tweak a little bit, whatever. And then the next stage is we're going to go into flow state intentionally. Okay. And then the next one is extract. All right. So now after you've done this flow state, you're going to have a bunch of stuff. Okay. And this stuff, it might be crap. It might not be great. And that's totally fine. But most likely there's going to be something. There's going to be something that you were feeling. There was something that came through that you didn't think of, that you're like, there's something there. Okay. If you're still not convinced with this, that's okay. You can still cycle around. Okay, you can keep jamming, keep coming up with stuff. Eventually you're going to find something that resonates with you, or something that you can like tweak so that it becomes something that resonates with you. Okay, so again, identify the golden moments, the hooks, the motifs, and interesting, unique ideas. Any earworms that come up, right? So we're looking for hooks, like the main thing of the song, like a groovy bass line, a sick drum beat, a catchy melody, nice chord progression, whatever that comes out, right? And then here you can, this is more of the editing phase, right? So we're shifting from kind of the creator phase. Like we started dreaming, like, all right, what do we want to do? What are we going to try? All right, let's set it up. Let's set it up. And then the next one is creator. It's like, all I'm going to do is focus on creating from the wake of what we dreamt about, what we envision, and just like creating as much stuff as possible. And now we're going back to the editor. Now we're like, all right, so what's actually good in here? All right, is this worth working on? Because a lot of us, like me included, like before I had a process, I would like polish turds, right? It's like you're working on this track that after you've worked on it for hours, you're like, this is even that good, to be honest. And that's because we might not have a process to iterate on ideas a ton before we actually move on to the higher stages of the process, which we'll get into. So again, yeah, you want to decide what to keep and decide what to experiment with, right? And edit and recycle. And as we continue through these live streams and answer questions and whatnot, I'll go through this like and get messy, and we'll go through this together. But it's like deciding on what to keep, what to experiment with, and what to edit and recycle, right? Because you might have a motif that's like, it's got something there, but you might want to like add in a couple notes and refine the timing, right? Or you might have like some kind of something, but you're like, I want to jam on that some more because there's something there, but it's not quite there yet. So again, this whole thing being not linear, you could go back from stage 3 to flow and just flow again with some new instruments and some new insights, jamming off other ideas. There's a million ways to do this, right? But then this one is like, let's try and transform and combine these saved elements into musical scenes and new variations. So typically in Ableton, this is when I'll start, like, you'll have a bunch of clips and a bunch of ideas, and you'll start organizing it loosely into maybe some song structure, all right? Some parts that work together, or unique, interesting combinations that came up that you didn't notice before, right? Because you just combine them and you're like, oh, this works, right? So then that's kind of what this stage is about. And you might shape and refine stuff. You might like get editing, right? Now you can get your little mouse out and tweak parts and add in parts if you want to, all that kind of good stuff. And then, yeah, the whole idea is to like loosely sketch out the main structural parts of your song, right? And export it in a format where you can listen to it beginning to end. That is so important. And we'll get into this as we move on. So far, we've been through these first 3. Let me close this. Clarify, flow, extract. All right. We're dreaming up. We're visualizing something. We're setting up our setup. We're adding limitations, getting the intention right. Flow. We're flowing out ideas as many as possible. We're not judging. We're having fun. We're getting into it. Extract. We're looking at what happened, and we're just being objective about like, what are the best moments? What are the parts that resonate with me? How could this be better? Do these parts work together? Loose structure of a song. That's where we're at. Okay. And then from here, like these 3 kind of intertwine. You can like do all 3 of these at the same time, though I wouldn't recommend like trying and edit and create at the same time. Just try to flow through them and maybe go back and forth, whatever. Maybe after you extract things, you go back to clarify and you get some new instruments now, right? It doesn't really matter. Whatever you feel works and whatever you're inspired to do in the moment. But the whole idea is that you get a practice in where you're doing these like half-hour sessions. You set a timer and you're doing this with those specific intentions to move forward with that specific phase. And as you can see, I have like several songs at different parts, right? I have this one in edit. I have these new ideas. I got a bunch of new ideas in another thing. But I have these songs at this part of the process. And over time, you could be working on several songs at the same time, which helps you stay objective and not attached to any song. It's actually truly magical once you try it, because you come back and you're like, oh, I totally forgot about this. And you get a new perspective on what you're working on in the early phases of iteration, right? Before you move on to the more techie stuff of structuring a song, editing it, mixing it, mastering it, making it sound amazing, you're really iterating ideas and like getting the melting pot of your subconscious working in many different ways in these first three phases. And then you move on to something like compose. Okay. So let's say this song now, we're in compose. So at this point, you've done these other phases. Maybe you're cycling another couple projects at the same time through those first three phases. And like this one, I've checked off all these things along the way. I've done all this stuff. This is where I'm at. Okay. So I have composed something and I've listened to it and I feel like it's good. All right. So now I'm at the part where I'm like, how can I enhance this using automation, adding transition, effects, like performing that stuff? Maybe I need more guitar. Maybe I want a different part, right? Whatever it is. And whenever I make changes to the song, I export the audio and I place it in this card so that when I come back to this, I can just listen to the audio and have a new perspective on it and decide what needs to happen. Because at the end of the day, the creative process is just a series of creative decisions from beginning to end, right? Like, and our brains are like decision avoiding machines because our like, there's our minds, which has like infinite potential and we don't even know the bounds of. And then there's like our physical brain that tries to conserve energy and protect us. And part of why a lot of people hit walls and writer's block and they avoid doing this stuff and they get scared is because it's our brain that's trying to help us stay safe by avoiding taking on all these extra decisions. Because like creative work is a ton of decisions. And the whole aim of this process is to help you have fun and make it easy to come up with these decisions, right? Because for example, with this track, after we've done a loose arrangement, we export it, we throw it in there, we don't even think about it. And then we cycle other songs. Now we're focused on other stuff. We're like, oh, let's try this idea. I want to try this kind of genre of music. Oh, what's the best idea here? And then like 2 or 3 days pass, and then you go back to this. And then when you come back to this song, you hear it with new ears. And that is very tough to do if you only work on one song from beginning to end, because your mind gets so attached to hearing things a certain way and emotionally attached to things that you lose any sense of objectivity as to like what's working and what's not working, as opposed to giving yourself that distance through a process. It really helps you inject that new perspective into what you're working on, right? And it's so invaluable because you approach it and you're like, you just have an intuition about it. You're like, this is working. This is amazing. Awesome. I'm excited. Or you're like, I don't know what I was thinking. Have you ever done that in the studio where you're like, you're feeling it. It's like getting late. You're like, oh my God, this is crazy. And you've like lost 2 or 3 hours. You shut it down, go to bed. You come up the next day, you listen. You're like, what was I thinking? Like, what is this? Right? So it gives you that distance to see, right? So if we look at compose, now we're moving the project from a series of loops, parts, and ideas into a time-bound musical story. So if we think back to extract, when you got like loose scenes of your song, you kind of got like a rough structure. Well, now it's like you're going from rough structure to like bounding it to time, right? Now there's a beginning, a middle, an end. There's no more loops. There's no more thinking about what parts are going where. It's like you're putting them in a timeline. And part of it is huge. Like, that part is huge so that it actually has a timeline and you're getting out of loop mode. That's so important. But that's the intention of this. And like, you want to try and tell a story with your song, or some people don't like the word story. Have a shape. Your track's going to have a shape, right? It's going to have like a build up to a drop to like another build up to the final drop. Or if you're doing more like rock, it's going to be like intro, verse, chorus, bridge, last chorus, right? It doesn't have to be that. There's like a million ways you can structure a song, but either way, there's going to be a shape. And the shape is what's important, because the climbing of dynamics and the contrasting of parts, like low dynamic, high energy, low, high energy, or building up to something, a climax, right, is all cues that you can see in storytelling, right? Think of your favorite Netflix series or favorite show that you love, and chances are that they're masters at storytelling, meaning in every episode there's an arc to the episode where there's a situation that happens, there's new circumstances, new characters that get introduced that change the dynamics, and it's building up to something, and then there's this like climax moment, and then there's like resolution, and usually a cliffhanger with shows where it's like, and next episode, stay tuned. So those kinds of cues can work in music so well, and that's what really makes timeless music, is when you like tell a story that really hits the listener and brings somebody like on a trip. And if you can do that to somebody, that's when they pay attention and they really want to come back and hear more of what you're doing. So that's a huge part of songwriting and composition, right? And then the next part of this phase is where I'm at with this track, is enhancing your song using automation, transition, and effects, performing your composition, and exporting your arrangements. So having a finished thing that you can listen to, and again, giving you some distance to then listen to it. All right, let me grab a sip of this. If anyone's live, let me know if you're there, if you can still hear me. If this stuff makes sense, if you've ever tried something like this with your music, or if you've seen some of this stuff in your music, but it's never been clear to you, or if you kind of have an apprehension towards doing something like this, whatever it is, I'm down to listen. I'd love to chat about it. So the next 3 phases, okay? So when we get into edit, mix, and master, this is what I feel a lot of music producers focus on, which is great. It's important. Huge part of the process, that you want to make your stuff sound great, right? You want to make it sound professional. You want to make it sound up to par, up to snuff with everything else. So that's when you focus on mixing techniques. That's when you focus on editing tricks, adding layers, new tracks, slick transitions, all that great stuff. The only caveat I have towards getting these 3 phases is, first of all, these 3 phases are typically the most time consuming. All right. So editing, mixing, and mastering, it does take time, especially if you're just learning, compared to these first phases. And a lot of people have resistance towards these 3 phases because they do require a little bit more like conscious focus on specific things. We'll get into them as we move forward. Awesome. Glad to hear it's still good. Amazing. Yeah. So, but one thing I do notice with music producers, especially if you're just starting out, and it's very easy to hyper focus on mixing and editing, which I'm not going to discount. They're super important. They're part of a professional production. But again, if you don't have a composition that has a convincing shape, if you haven't iterated enough to have great ideas, right? If you haven't like compared enough ideas to actually get great ideas, and discard the ones that are just turds, like they're not worth polishing, right? And if you didn't have a way to like do it efficiently and fun in a way that you're not falling into editing and mixing yet. Notice we haven't talked about that yet, right? We haven't even gone there. You can end up like focusing on editing and mixing music that just frankly is forgettable or isn't good enough, right? And I don't want to say that to like take the wind out of your sails. Like I think that if you're getting started, finishing a track from beginning to end is going to teach you the best and the most efficiently to learn everything you need to learn. However, don't get concerned with editing, mixing, and mastering if you haven't got this first, right? If you can't arrange a convincing song and you haven't found like a voice or a thing or a flow or a way to like get ideas in the studio that's fun and easy, and a system together so you can like see all your ideas and find with your artistic ear what ideas are the best, then I would be like, focus on that first, and then we'll get into the editing and mixing. Okay. But with that said, let's say you got all that down and you have some songs. All right. Let's say you have like 10 songs. All right. And you pick the best, I don't know, 3, right? Those songs are going to be so much better. I can't even just do this and you'll get your mind blown. Is like, those tracks will be so much better than if you just hyper focused on one track and getting that track perfect, because you're going to be doing 10 tracks and you're going to be extracting the best ones of those 10. Oliver, what's up? Hi, you're hearing some good and helpful advice, but can't see the other screen I'm referring to. Oh, can you see this screen? I hope that you can see this. The other screen I'm referring to is like my live stream settings, which you probably don't want to see on my own camera, but hopefully you can see this. So if you can't see this, that's a problem. But yeah, I'm just kind of going through the system that I'm going to be iterating on and working with behind production. I'm glad it's being useful, helpful advice. Let me know if you have any questions. But yeah, this is, hopefully you can see this screen. Oh, you can't because I'm sharing this. You see, we're testing things, my friend. We're testing things. So everything everything I've been sharing, you haven't been seeing. So now you'll get to see it. All right. We're learning and growing. So what I have here, I'll just iterate this because I was not actually sharing, is okay, all the phases we've been talking about: clarify, flow, extract. The first three that are like non-linear, they're cyclical. You can go back and forth. I had this track over here it disappeared. Let me undo that. I have this track over here and it updates. And then in this system, all right, I have all of these checklists open that were iterating what we went over. Okay, so we went over the main things, the main kind of focuses, the mental filters, the modes of thinking. Doesn't that sound epic? Behind each of these phases. And that's what I was referring to. There it is. Awesome. Thanks for being patient with me. This is like first live stream with all these new setups. So I'm glad, hopefully you could see this. I can actually get my face out of the way so you can see it clearer, more clear. Or can I? Yes, there you go. So, okay, so you can see this, and let's collapse these. I'll just review them real quick because it's nice to have a visual cue. So clarify again is like a great way to start a session, is to just get like interface with your intention. Like what is it that you're being driven to do right now, right? Is it developing a skill? Is it working on a particular genre? Is it finishing tracks? Great, whatever, exploring and experimenting, amazing, right? Just get clear on it. And it can be anything. And then determine the required instrumentation. So for example, if I'm doing a rock track, guess what? I'm probably gonna need guitars, right? Or bass, or rock drums. If you're doing like EDM, you might need like synth and like super heavy 808, clear and precise kick drums and crazy snares that are layered, whatever it is. And I suggest that you do rhythm, bass, melody, and dynamics without going too deep into that rabbit hole. They echo, what are the four elements? Earth, water, air, and fire, right? And if we translate those four elements to like the qualitative elements of being a human, is like your physical body, your emotions, your thoughts, and like your dynamic, your soul, right? Your style. And if you can just get those four things, it might feel completely restricting to you if you're used to having a zillion tracks, but mastering a small amount of things can go such a long way. Okay, so if you have one rhythmic instrument, one bass instrument, one thing to do melodies and chords, and then one fun thing that you're exploring and experimenting with, great, set it up, add some macros, add a filter, add some like sends to delays, add some cool trippy like saturation filter layer, an arpeggiator, MIDI effects, whatever it is that will get you in the mode when you're flowing. And then, yeah, if you want to set like a tempo, if you want to set a time signature, a key, if you want to be super like limiting with it, or you can discover those things as you start iterating ideas, great. Second one is flow. So you'll notice the first mode of thinking is all about dreaming. It's all about visualization and setting things up, pulling back the arrow, getting ready. The other one is all about the creator, right? It's all about letting go, no judgment. Let's do it. Let's make stuff. And then so it's all about disengaging from your judgments, connecting to your body. It's fun to stand up and play and jam stuff, playing those instruments, not judging the ideas, not editing stuff unless it's super bad, and recording everything and just getting as many ideas as possible. Moving on, then you're putting on the editor hat. All right, this is like convergent thinking. This is actually emergent thinking. So we won't get deep into that rabbit hole. But basically, you're editing, and you're looking at your ideas and identifying the best moments, the hooks, the motifs. What could you develop? What does it miss? What's worth working on? What's the golden moment, right? What were you really vibing on? Decide what to keep, what to experiment with, and what to remove or recycle. Yeah, and then you can start outlining scenes if you're using something like Ableton or Logic, or you could just do it in the timeline, but start loosely getting ideas of like, all right, this is kind of the intro. This is kind of like the first part. This is the second part. This is the first part with something different now, whatever it is, right? And then now we're at compose, where we talked about storytelling, right? And having a shape and really telling a story with your parts or whatever, like having an experience that has tension and release that communicates movement. And then, yeah, enhancing your stuff, automation, tricks, all that kind of stuff. Perform your composition. I like to do that where you're like in Ableton and you have all this stuff in here and you're just like triggering scenes and you're playing with stuff and it might be messy, all good, but at least you have something in the timeline. See where I'm going? And then again, if we close this, we'll open it back up. Having multiple things in here, like multiple sessions and things that you're working on and cycling between them, it gives you that added layer of objectivity, which is very easy to lose if you focus on working on only one track, right? Because you hear it over and over and over. You can't hear it any different way or getting stuck in a loop. By doing this, you're doing like little interval sessions, like half an hour here, half an hour compose, half an hour flow, whatever it is. And then when you cycle back to something, you're like, oh, an answer might be super obvious, right? That you didn't hear before because you got some space. All right. And then, yeah, I had my whole like standing on a soapbox about focusing on editing too much too early, but now we're going to do that. So let's move to edit. All right. If you got any questions, hope this all makes sense. And we're going to start doing this live as we continue forward. Yeah. So edit. Okay. So this is really where you take something and you like, a good analogy for this is like winemaking, right? Like you picked your grapes. You're like, all right, we're going to make cinnamon, blueberry, red wine. All right. That's the vision. And then the flow state is like, you threw all the ingredients together and you like stamp your grapes together and it's messy and there's peels and you're all like covered in juice. And then the next phase is like you're extracting the juice. You're getting all the pulp and all the gross stuff out of there. You got this juice, all the, you know, the golden moments. And then you composed it. You're like, all right, let's add the cinnamon. Let's add the whatever, blueberries. And now you have a recipe, right? You want to like tell a story with the bouquet of flavors of your wine. And editing is what usually takes the longest in winemaking. And it's the fermentation process where it now becomes an adult beverage, right? There's alcohol in it. And this is where you really kind of get in the nitty gritty. And it can be painful, right? You're looking at your arrangement. You're like, yeah, this is off time. This harmony doesn't work. This is way too busy. There's something missing here. Where's the payoff of this track? Like you start getting really, really critical, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it really transforms your composition from like, this is a good song to like, whoa, this is an amazing song, right? So a lot of that stuff happens in the editing. And here's some of the cues I've written out is like, listen carefully through the composition and make a list of what needs to be editing. And this is super valuable. If you can listen to your stuff outside the DAW and you're always exporting audio of your compositions and your ideas, you have it outside the DAW and whatever, sit down on your porch in the morning, cup of coffee, give it a spin and have a list and write down what has to change. Like you might be like, this intro sucks. Like this has to change. Maybe it's awesome. Maybe at like after the second chorus, when you get back to the verse, the rhythmic part of your song feels a little off. Like, I don't know, something's not jiving. Make a list. I have to edit that part, or that part has to come out, or maybe I need to add some color to the harmony here. Whatever it is, you write it down and you have a list now before getting in the DAW. And then the whole idea is to enhance and accentuate the gold while ruthlessly discarding the crap. Hopefully that worked for dramatic effect. So yeah, basically like you're just looking to be like, oh, maybe this melodic line is like the main feature of this verse. And let's like add some few notes to like harmonize few of those notes. So you're like coloring and accentuating the main thing, right? But maybe there's like something that you just added this layer and you're like, this sounds cool. But you in critically listening to it, you're like, this doesn't add anything. It's too busy. It doesn't work with what's already going on. Let's just remove it. Okay. And fun fact, in your DAW, you can like remove things without actually removing it. So you don't actually lose anything. So there's no harm in being ruthless because you can always return things. Again, get distance and perspective. That's where the list comes in. Then breathe new life into your project with fresh ears. So keeping that perspective, okay? It's so easy to get lost in the weeds where you're editing stuff that doesn't matter, right? Tweaking your snare drum EQ for like hours is not helping anybody. And like I've been there multiple times. It's just not a good time because you want to try and bridge the gap between being in the weeds and what is the high level experience you're delivering for somebody who's going to hear this the first time, right? So that's kind of where you're coming from with this. And it takes usually multiple iterations. It's pretty rare that you're going to come back to the composition with your list and you're just going to bang it out and then it's going to be amazing. Most of the times you're going to be like discovering new stuff as you're doing those iterations and those edits. New stuff might come up. You might get new ideas. You might want to flow again. You might want to go back and add a new instrument and flow out ideas and whatever it is, right? Whatever the song needs. But the whole point is that it's probably going to take multiple iterations of editing before you get the track to where you want it. Okay. And finalize your track and export and prepare and organize your session for the next phase. So one big caveat when wrapping up editing. Okay. So after you've listened to the track a few times, hopefully with some space in between, maybe you do other sessions on other tracks in between, but you get to the point where you're happy with the composition. One thing that I highly encourage you to do, and you don't have to be super religious and like rigid about this, but there is value in separating the mixing phase from the editing phase. So if you think about mixing from the perspective of a mixing engineer, okay, if you were to send your tracks to me to mix your track, your song, for example, you would have to bounce everything down to audio, right? All of your MIDI instruments, all of your crazy stuff would have to be rendered into audio and would have to be committed. Okay, so all of your automations, all of your cool effects, whatever it is that you want to have in your song will have to be printed down and committed to before moving on to the mixing phase, because the mixing engineer is not going to have the same instruments as you, is not going to have the same plugins, and he's not going to be editing MIDI for the most part unless he really needs to or she really needs to. Okay, and it's useful to think about it in that way, even if you're doing it yourself. And I don't always do this. I sometimes will edit things in the mix because sometimes you realize stuff in the mix you didn't realize in the edit, where you're like, this is way too busy still. Let's take this off. It's like you're working with a client and they put like 5 mics on their guitar amp and you're like, I'm going to use one of them, the one that sounds the best, and the other 4, we're just not using those. And sometimes you make those decisions in the mix because you just do whatever the song needs. Anyway, so all that to say is that when you finish editing, when you're like moving this card into mixing, try to commit to yourself mentally that you are done with the song. The song is done. Okay, like no more messing with the MIDI notes, no more like changing like sounds and automate. Like we'll get into automation for mixing, but like the composition of the track is done. Okay, so now with that in mind, you move on to mixing. And before you move out to mixing, again, like if you were to get a mixing engineer to mix your stuff, you would have to organize your tracks. Like your tracks would have to be consolidated, bounced to audio, labeled effectively so you know where they are, and just organized. Okay, so that's where the prep comes in. It sucks, it can be boring, but it helps you so much to stay in flow state in mixing. And we're going to talk about that as we move to mixing. So let's say this composition was done. I'm actually in probably the composition or edit phase for this track, but I'm just going to move it for now. I love how it updates the mix thing. I love that. Okay. So now let's talk to mixing. So it's a huge question. So many people always ask about mixing. How do I mix? Let's talk about it. So the first thing you do is, this is assuming your thing's organized, you save a new session. So you take your session, you go in Ableton, wherever, go up here, boom, save as. Okay, and you're going to name this a new project file because you want your finalized edit of your composition to be untouched. And then when you start mixing, you have a new session. Okay, that's important. And every time you're going to, because most likely you're going to need a couple passes, especially if you're starting out, to get the mix close to where you like it. So you're going to then name each session and save it as a new session for each new mix, because sometimes when you mix a track, you make it worse. And you're like, I really want to go back to where I was. And if you don't save iterations and do in new sessions, you can shoot yourself in the foot. And I've done that many times. So you want to first and foremost just listen to the mix without listening to it in the DAW. So like shut down your screens, listen to the track, maybe get a list out, identify the problems is the first thing. Like what is not working in this track? And then you want to remove any conflicting frequencies to make the maximum impact. Okay, so you might be listening to your mix and you might realize that your low end is completely messed. Like you can't hear anything in the low end. The kick drum is muddy. The bass is muddy. There's no power. The vocals are like muffled. Like it might be a mess. Maybe it sounds clear. Who knows? Maybe there's too much harshness. Maybe it's too busy in the high end. There's too much going on. There's too many things competing. All right, take a note of it, because you don't want to lose sight of what you're actually doing as a mixing engineer. Is you're taking the final composition and all you're doing is enhancing it, refining it, and giving it the most sonic aesthetic you can to make it impactful, but you're not making a good song. Like the song has already happened, right? You're just enhancing it to sound profesh and to accentuate what the song needs. That has to be the focus as a mixing engineer, because otherwise you get lost in the sauce, right? And we've all seen this where people are talking about like parallel compression, and I boosted 1K and I have this like crazy thing going, and like that's cool if it's serving the purpose. But if it's not serving the purpose, nobody cares except for other mixing engineers, which is like less than 0.1% of the whole world, right? The only thing that matters is the final impact on the listener as a mixing engineer. Useful to remember. And then I have 7 steps that I go through for mixing. So again, organizing your session, you could have done that in the editing, but if not, that's what you want to do first, because similarly to when you're extracting ideas or when you're coming up with ideas earlier in the process, when you're getting into flow state, you don't want to be menu diving. Okay, you don't want to be stuck scrolling through presets and like trying to find this plugin in the heat of the moment when you have an idea for mixing. Okay, you want it to be like the smoothest transition possible between what you're hearing, what the idea is and what needs to happen, and you effectuating the idea. And the shorter you can make that time, the closer you're going to stay to keeping the vision of your actual purpose of mixing. And that's where the tricky part of mixing is, because it's like super technical by nature, but you want to make it stay creative, right? So it's an interesting mix of those roles of thought. But I would say that the main pillar of mixing is creative. It's a creative thing. You want to be in flow state. Okay. So again, organize your session, set up your routing. So if you have a mixing template, great. If not, set one up. It's super easy. And I would say like your go-tos. So if you're new to mixing, some of my go-tos is like I have a parallel compression bus. I have usually 1 or 2 reverbs or short delays for the vocals. I usually have one super trippy special effect just to have fun with, to see. And I usually have maybe a sidechain depending on the genre of music. And that's usually what I start with, okay? And I have all that routing set up. So that's more referring to people who have like a crazy studio and they might have outboard gear. Like if they have outboard compression and they have outboard delay units or like preamps, whatever, you have to make sure all that stuff is set up so that you can just move a switch and it like turns on the plugin, instead of being like, oh, I want to add compression on this. Let me go get the cables and like plug it in and turn it on. Like you've already lost flow, like you're done. So you want to set that up as much as you can ahead of time. That's what I'm getting to. And once you have that set up, so like visualize it. So let's say you have a track and it's easy for you within, like if you have a MIDI controller, whatever you got to do to just reach for a knob and just turn it to effectuate the thing that you want to happen, right? So let's say you want to add reverb on the vocal, done. Let's say you want to add a little bit more saturation on your snare. You set up a bus, you set up a thing, done. You add it and you can measure it right here. Let's say you want to whatever, add that sidechain compression or send something to a parallel compression bus, send it to send 3. It's there, right? So that's the whole thing you want, is that when you're mixing, you stay in flow state. And to be able to do that, again, you have to draw back the arrow. You have to set up the setup. And the more you set up the setup, the more you can just use it as a starting point, and then it becomes easier and easier. Next is balance levels. Okay, so this may be tough for some people, but the most useful thing to do when you're starting mixing is to avoid doing any processing. So no EQ, no compressors, no fancy stuff, just panning and balancing levels, okay? Unless there's like a super glaring problem, and you'll get more used to this as you go on. If there's like something that's like, it's a problem, you can deal with it really quick. Just deal with it, filter out the low end, find the resonant frequency, whatever you got, edit the thing, take out a layer if there's too much going on, that kind of stuff. If you don't have to do that, just focus on bouncing levels. So I would do 2 or 3 passes, like listen to the song, and all you're doing is adjusting faders of your snare track, your kick track, your hi-hat, your overheads, your vocals, your harmonies if you have vocals, your guitar tracks, your extra melodies, right? Bass line, and just keep playing with the levels. It's awesome if you have faders because you can actually get physical with it, and like use the stereo field, like where are things sitting, and you can even get fun with automation really quick, like automate the volume of stuff. Like for example, if you're in a bridge and you have this like crazy synth line that's now like the main thing, but the main thing was the vocals before, like automate the volume of everything so that the synth line is the focus, right? Because that's the key to a great mix, is letting it breathe with what needs to be the focus center stage at any point in time and what goes into the background. And you can achieve that just with panning and level automation. Okay. From there, then you want to reach for your EQ and your compressors to start dealing with like 85-90% of what you're going to be doing in the mix anyway, which is addressing problematic frequencies that are just like masking everything and accentuating like crazy the stuff that's working. Okay, so if you're working on a track and like it sounds great, you're going to enhance what already sounds great, and you're going to take away what's taking away from what sounds great, if that makes sense. And we can talk more about EQ and compression when we get there, but basically, like EQ is like your lightsaber, and then compression is like your 1 or 2 moves of the force that you use to really pin down the dynamics, particularly in the low end, or if you want to make like drums sound super punchy, or if you want something to sound more spacious, right? Like have more body to it, then you get into compression. And yeah, then you can get into like fun stuff like saturation or special effects, duplicating tracks and like processing one like crazy, parallel compression, sidechain compression, have some fun with it. And then automation is a huge part. So I would actually like whatever, if you need to set a timer for all of these things, do it. If not, just focus on some time to do automation, because automation is like what will make your mix stand above the rest, because you paid special attention to get in the nitty gritty to like automate your overheads on your drums, like down 2 dB for the bridge, right? Because that's what it needed, or whatever. It doesn't really matter what it is, but you paid special attention to like move things slightly. Maybe you need no compression on something for a part. Maybe you want to send it to parallel compression and saturation just for like, you know, coming back to the final chorus to make things super small and like crispy before it like hits really hard again, right? Like all of those things, attention to detail and whatever comes to you creatively while you're mixing, again, flow state, automation, right? Let me get a sip of this because my voice is starting to go. Hopefully this makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, let me know. If you have questions about this, let me know. But this is what I have started to use to avoid getting lost in the sauce, right? Because you can make a great mix with very simple approaches and just listening to what the music is doing and what comes to you creatively to really enhance the song, right? That's all you're doing as a mixing engineer. Finally, you can move on to effects. So sometimes when you're working with a track, there'll be room for special effects. So like something like I mentioned, where you like collapse the room of the drums to very small for a specific point in the song. Maybe you do like a crazy effect on the vocals at a particular time. Maybe you add like transitions, like build ups or bass drops, whatever it is. There's usually a chance to do that if there isn't that already. If you're like a crazy experimental artist already and you bake that in as you're, composing stuff, maybe you don't need to do extra effects. Maybe there's already a crazy amount of effects, right? And then moving on to finalize. Okay, so at a certain point after you've done this, you don't want to get lost in the weeds. You want to try and like do this as quickly and efficiently as possible. Get creative. When you're like, it's working, I like it, or I don't know what to do, I'm kind of stuck. Great, all good. Finalize it, bounce out the audio, export the audio and put it in the card of whatever you're working on or somewhere you can find it super easy. I just like to stay organized here. And then you're going to listen to it outside of the DAW. All right, you're done with the mix in the DAW right now, and listen to it on different speaker systems. Okay, so when we get into the technicalities of mixing, like making sure your mix is mono compatible, for example, or making sure your stereo field isn't phasing. Okay, these are more technical things. We can get into this when we get there, but that's going to contribute to how it translates on super shitty like iPhone speakers or laptop speakers to earbuds to your monitors to in your car to on like a stereo speaker to like on a stage. Okay, and getting your mix to translate effectively in all of those formats. So making sure it sounds good in mono, making sure that it stands up against any other mix in terms of frequency, like the low end is there. There's enough mids so that you have that impact. The stereo field isn't too wide so that when you collapse it to mono, you lose everything. Okay, keeping in mind all those things. And you're going to specifically listen for that. And also just like non-technically experience the music and see if it impacts you in the way that it could, right? That it should. And for the intention of the song, right? And that's what you're listening for. And I would suggest to listen to it wherever you can, like your Bluetooth speaker, your phone speaker, your laptop, off your TV, right? In your car. And just take notes. Get a list again. Oh man, in the car, the bass was super loud. It was taking everything over. Oh man, in my earphones, like the high end got harsh. That's worth noting down, because the more you can be objective and look at your mix from different perspectives, then you're going to get a clearer picture as to what you have to do, and it's going to keep you out of the sauce and doing the thing you have to do. And then basically you're redoing that as many times as you need to until you feel the mix is good enough, right? You're happy with it, or it's the best you can do with your current skill set, which is totally fine. Okay, like I'm still working on my mixing abilities. Like I'm not a world-class mixing engineer. I'm still iterating and learning, but I know at a certain point it's like I'm happy with this. It sounds good. I can't do any better. Like it's like diminishing returns at a certain point of time point in time. And again, just like with making music, it's like quantity. Like doing multiple different mixes on all your different tracks that actually make it to this point in the process is going to give you the experience, is going to give you that different perspectives and like, oh, this track sounds different here. Oh, I did this differently here for this track. Oh, this is an interesting new situation that I haven't dealt with before. And getting all of those things and all of those different perspectives of experience are going to be exponentially better than trying to perfect one mix. Okay. So again, so just do your best with your current skill set, ask a couple of questions. Like if you're mixing and you're following along with these series as we go forward, like I send over the mix, I'll give you some feedback, like have a couple of questions, try it out. But at a certain point, just like call it done, move on, like decide to release it or not. It doesn't matter. You don't have to release everything you finish. Keep that in mind. Move on to master. Okay. And now it's just basically, again, save a new song project, like save a new session in your DAW. Same with every new iteration of your mix. If you do 7 mix takes on your mix, you're going to have 7 different sessions for each step of the thing. Okay, that's just a great practice to have. And you're going to do the same thing with your master. So save a new session called Master 1 on your last mix. So if your last mix was like mix try number 3, and I'm like, yeah. And then you're like, okay, save that session as a new session for Master 1. And for this, it's a lot more of a objective perspective. Okay, you're not really listening to the song in terms of creatively, in terms of like the song. You're thinking more of it in terms of sonic and acoustics. Okay, so how does it fit with everything else that's out there, and how does it translate in different environments? All right, so you're just double checking that everything sounds balanced and clear as it's condensed into one track, because you can't change individual tracks anymore. You've bounced it out to one stereo file. So within that stereo file, you have a new perspective on the whole thing, right? And with that new perspective, you can then look at it and just be more objective about like, okay, how's the low end? Is there too much low end here? Is there not enough low end? How are the low mids? Are they like muddy? Is there anything I can do to fix it? How's the high end? Is it too harsh? Is it too much high end sizzle going on? Or is it dull? right? Does it need more high-end energy? And if you send stuff to a mastering engineer, which I would suggest if you're like releasing music officially, because mastering engineers are going to be significantly better at it because they have years and years of experience. It's relatively inexpensive and they have like all the experience and all the gear. Okay. But if you're wanting to practice mastering, you can do so, all good. You can even release your own masters. There's no way to do it, but it's definitely worth checking out because you can hear what a pro master sounds like. And then you'll have like one of your own tracks professionally mastered that you can reference now. Okay. And then you can aim for that with your own masters. So yeah, again, you want to do any final tweaks with subtle EQ and compression, and you're going to increase the volume to make sure that it hits the LUFS meter or whatever, the decibel limit of wherever you're uploading it to. Okay, so this is a little bit more about formatting. It's a little bit more technical. And we're thinking about translation for the medium. So back in the day, if you were to like, I want a CD for my record, you need to export at the right bit rate, sample rate, dithering, all that crazy stuff to make sure it's the right format for the CD, right? Today, most likely it's going to be on streaming, which is like minus 14 LUFS or something is the cap. I forget what the cap is, but it's like that's what you want your track to be volume wise so that it's the same volume as everything else. So that's what we're doing with the limiter. And again, with mastering, most of the time, unless the mixing phase was pretty rough, your moves are going to be subtle. You want it to be as subtle as possible because small tweaks on the whole mix can make a huge difference. And then, yeah, again, like referencing, I usually don't reference too much when I'm mixing, but I will reference when I'm mastering. So I'll bring in like a pro mix of like one of my favorite artists that's in the same ballpark of genre, right? And just compare it in your DAW. So I'll show you how I go about doing that when we get to that live stream. And I also have videos on YouTube if you want to learn more. But yeah, so basically we're just getting it set up so we can compare our track to that other track in a way that's the same volume. And we're just listening for low end, mids, high end. How does it compare? You can even use like frequency spectrum graphs to really help you with that stuff. And I'm going to pop back here. What's up? And yeah, and then basically that's it. And then you export and finish. And part of art is never finished. All right. It's only abandoned. That's a quote. And it's so true. Okay. Because we can work on something forever. And I've been stuck in this trap many, many times. I still do from time to time where you can work and iterate on something forever. There's never going to be a time where something is perfect. Everything could have been worked on more. Everything can be better. And at a certain point, you have to just call something done. You have to make the decision of saying, okay, this is done. And we're going to move on to the next thing. And that opens up your mind to like invite the next thing in the cycle. And cycling more things through this whole thing is the best way to progress. That's how you're going to get that exponential progress as opposed to hyper focusing on one thing. Because if you can get through this whole thing with multiple tracks and you're iterating on a bunch of ideas and you got some mixes done, some masters done, you're going to get significantly better quicker, right? And there's no way around this. There is no magic pill around this. And some people are like, oh, just focus on arrangement, just focus on mixing. But it's like, if you don't have a way to iterate ideas and create good compositions and all that stuff, you're going to have great mixing abilities, but without the composition stuff. And like a mix will never, like you can't make a good song sound great with a mix, right? You need a great song to sound great with a mix. Or if something sounds, not special in a composition phase, it's not going to sound great, even if you mix it professionally. And we've all heard that, right? Like I'm sure you've heard music that sounds great. It sounds professional, but it doesn't do anything for you, right? I know I have, versus timeless music, right? Like modern music that's timeless, where it's like they're hits, they're catchy, and it's like the production is amazing, but it's also an amazing song, right? And you remember it. Same with like songs back in the day, right? Where the production maybe wasn't amazing, right? Like it's maybe not like super high fidelity mixed and everything sounds amazing. It's like, it sounds good, but the song's great. And that's what makes it timeless. So that's something to keep in mind as we roll through this, right? It's like we want to kind of just take that perspective where it's like the arrangement and the composition, the ideas, the art is the top, right? And then the editing and the mastering is the next phase, right? And if you can like get your arrangements to be solid and your compositions to be super strong, the mixing phase will come easy. Because I've mixed multiple projects where the arrangement is the problem, right? For example, like if we go to like thinking of bass, right? If you have a bass line and you also have like a piano part that's playing a bunch of stuff in the bass range, just from an arrangement standpoint, all right? Just from like, I'm gonna do this big, just from an arrangement standpoint, the music is going to be tough to mix because there's too much stuff going on in the low end. And if you can connect those dots from having the experience of mixing stuff and you're like, oh man, like I got to keep the low end simple so that it's easy to mix. And you can only get those dots connected by the experience that you gain from going through it. And the more you connect all of these phases together into one thing, that's when it becomes easier and you start to see those results. So Olivier, I never get past the composition. Where do you get stuck in the composition, my friend? Well, yeah, that's amazing. Like that focus, writing music for fun and for yourself is why we all got into this, right? And it's, to me, in my personal opinion, it's like the reason that should be number one. Some people get into this for money or fame, but it's like, that's not the reason. That's not what's going to keep you going. So I love that intention, Olivier. Like I'm there with you. As I like to say, like making music is shaping and refining part of yourself. As you know, that sounds pretty trippy, but it's true. It's like you're coming up with stuff that came through you and you're like then using your artistic mind to refine it and shape it in a way that makes sense and feels good to you. And while you're doing that, you're also growing. You're also learning more about what you actually like and what actually feels authentic to you. And what better pathway to self-awareness is there? I don't know. I don't know. You tell me. You don't mix or master anything. Well, it's not that difficult, and we'll learn how to do that together. So if you have any questions about it, don't feel too intimidated about it. It's pretty simple once you get it, for sure. But let me know what you're getting stuck with in your compositions, and maybe we can talk about it. Because that's the whole point of doing this live. Let's see if we can help each other out. So maybe we move to the DAW. Should we move to the DAW? I did a lot of talking there. I did a lot more talking than I expected to, but I kind of wanted to communicate like the whole arc of what I was thinking for this thing is like going through this thing while doing it live and mistakes and all. Like it's not gonna be like on it all the time for me. Like I'm gonna be confused and hit walls as well, but we're gonna get through it together. And as well as if you have any questions, like I'm here to answer them, here to help. Right. So let's move over here to the screen again. Let's close this down. So again, the system is super helpful. I have a link to it up there if you want to check it out. But this 7 steps with the Notion template, man, it's super useful. And I'm gonna move this one back over here because that's where I was. And yeah, this, whatever. Let's start something new. Let's just start from the ground up. So I'm in Ableton. And we can start with phase 1. So you just have to tell me, give me a song title, give me a vibe. And I'm just going to start checking things out. So yeah, designing instruments. So I don't know if we want to whip out the guitar. I got a guitar. I got this whole setup that we can talk about. Maybe I'll save that for another time because it's pretty intense. But I have, let's get some sounds going. Know what I'm saying? Neural DSP. So if anyone's a guitarist, this stuff is the bomb for guitar stuff. So I'm going to pop it on an audio track. I'm just going to get rid of these other tracks, simplify stuff right now. And let's open this up. Let me know if you guys play any instruments. What kind of music do you make? What is the thing that pulls you into it? Surf rock. Yeah. Hell yeah. Get psychedelic. So I'm gonna go with input 3, 4, and I think I have that plugged in here. This is 3, I believe. So one thing I really like about using a guitar plugin like this is the con is that it takes a lot of CPU resources, but the pro is that you can change your tone afterwards, right? Like, you don't have to commit to anything, which in itself can be a pro or con. But yeah, this thing sounds awesome, and then you can tweak it as you go, and it's just easy. It's plug and play, right? So let's record, enable that. We're getting audio. Sweet. Make sure the monitoring's auto. And make sure we have this on. I might have to have some crazy audio routing going on. This should be on. We might not be getting guitar sounds, guys, with my live streaming setup. Sad face. I'm getting audio. Oh, it's just super quiet. Let's see if I can actually, I think it's this input 3 and 4. My interface is like super quiet. High gain. Oh, there we go. There we go. And now we can hear it. Sweet. It's a little loud. And I don't want direct monitoring. I think I have that on. All right, can you guys hear the guitar? I played guitar for many years. Started getting into synth about 2 years back. Sounds like my journey. I started with guitars. Still play guitar like crazy. I play in a band. But then got into the push too, which inevitably led myself into synths. But yeah, love myself some guitar. Some jazzy chords here. Let's go with... So I think I'm getting the DI signal. I'm not sure what's going on with the routing. I might have to go into input 2. So I'm going to try that real quick. You see? I kind of love this because it's like, as embarrassing as it is to run into issues, it's real. It's like, all right, the audio signal isn't working, so I'm going to change the input. Apologies if that destroyed your speakers or your ears. It's not my intention. Mm-hmm. So instrument, we want 2. I can hear that. That's a bit too direct monitoring. Maybe we don't want that. I kind of just want it through Ableton. Yeah, I think something's going on with my weird ass routing for the live stream. So for now, we're gonna put the guitar down. Sad face. But we were talking about synths and stuff. So I have a synth that I really like. Let's do that. I gotta figure out the routing. Just when you think you figured everything out for a setup, there's something else that happens. Still have the hard time with the software. You sequence stuff on synths, drum, machines, and jam along with your guitar. Well, that sounds like what I do. So what do you have? I'd love to know what you're having a hard time with. Because trying to, iterating on, I've been using the word iterating a ton, which I don't know why, but like getting your studio to feel like an extension of your instrument, which having like again, it's like the first phase we're talking about, like having a sequencer, having a drum machine, having your guitar set up so that you can jam over it and just have it set up, and then you're off to the races, right? Pyrodyne, modular guitar, bass, heavy metal, violin, and some weird stuff you built working on chill lo-fi, but still in the grind for making mid-tempo and is my main genre. That sounds amazing. I want to hear some of your stuff for sure. Modular, I touched on that a bit. Guitar, bass, love it. Heavy metal with violin, like right up my alley. I used to be so hard into metal, like crazy stuff, like the Faceless, Animals as Leaders, the Opeth, Meshuggah. Like I still listen to that from time to time, but I'm more into like weird down tempo, trippy guitar music. But frick, I love the unique combination of of like instruments and vibes. That's cool. But yeah, let's whip out a synth. Let's try it. So I got, let's see, I got a couple. There's some free ones too if you haven't checked out. There's like Vital. Vital's like ridiculous, and it's a free one. I hear you, Olivier. Spent time with Ableton. Yeah, it's actually, they're like on the surface, like it looks complex, but once you wrap your mind around it, like once you understand like the thing that Ableton does, like how it works and what most of the things do, you're off to the races, right? Like it's really not that difficult, but I feel you if it's an obstacle. But if you're interested in learning more about that stuff, like I like am committed to helping people learn that, and yeah, let me know. Because yeah, like if you look here, it's basically there's just the buttons at the top. Once you know what that is, you just learn about how everything works, right? You have your browser, which is like all your sounds, all your plugins. I'm sure you know that. You have the two views. You have these two views at the bottom, right? Which we'll get some clips going here. Yeah, and then it's basically just like getting the hotkeys that matter, make it easy, and then you're off to the races. It's just about finding your relationship with it. But anyway, let's find a sound. So I have this Rolly. Let's move this. Let's have some fun. Rolly. Cool. So let's I just like keeping things a little organized. So synth is perfect. Let's go purple. Okay, let's open it up. Have you guys ever heard of Equator 2? So I got really nerdy into I don't want, no. So there's the patch. I got really nerdy into MPE for a while, which is like MIDI polyphonic expression, and it's super nerdy, but it's awesome. Basically gives you see these 5 things here. So if you have like a MIDI controller, like let me go in my hands actually. So this actually has MPE, where the harder I press on this, you'll notice it opens up the filter just by pushing harder, right? And I think this was like one of the first ones. You may have seen this thing. This is like a Seaboard Rise by Rolly, and this synth is built by Rolly. So there's the connection. And yeah, like this thing has those 5 controls. It has slide, glide, slide, glide, strike, press, and lift. And you can assign those 5 gestures to different components of your synth, right? So it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. So for now, let's just like, let's say we're not going to get into sound design because that's a whole rabbit hole in itself, but let's like get a sound that we like and set up some macros. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot me some suggestions, but I'm going to start with Rhodes, because I love a Rhodes. Or how do you spell Rhodes? Dimensional Rhodes. Let's see how this sounds. Okay. All right, so let's go with a good old minor 7. Nice. Let's go up an octave. Cool. All right. What do you guys think of that? So what we can do in Ableton, so because this is not, let me go back over here. So because this isn't a native Ableton thing, it doesn't have the macros that automatically pop up. So to do that in Ableton, you can just hit this little arrow beside the third-party plugin. Okay, and then hit configure. And then you just click on the thing you want. Boing, macro 1, macro 2, macro 3, macro 4, macro 5. So that should be good. Get out of configure. And we could like actually hit this, hit Command G, quick little tip for you. So if you group an instrument, it gives you access to macros and macro variations. So now we have these like things that we can map in Ableton. So we're going to just go into MIDI map. Actually, I'm just going to do it here. Edit MIDI map. Boom. It's going to be that. No, sorry. It's actually been a while since I did this. What do you want to map this to 1? So macro 1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4. And I'll show you why this is important. Like this is like sounds tedious and boring. And then I could name these what it is. So let's just maybe do that so we actually know what it is. Rename, phase, tab. What's the second one? Drive, tab, verb, tab, trem. Cool. See, we already have all these effects. Other trem. Trem mix. Okay, so now we have 5 things. And if I go back to, let me move this thing, too many screens. If we move back to the hands, now we have 5 macros up here. Okay, so now if I like hold this chord, I don't know why it's not letting me, there we go. Here's our macros. Right, so now we have a phaser that like as you're playing, you can bring it up, bring it down. Some drive. Right, you can like play with this stuff live, that's the whole thing. Like as you're coming up with ideas, you guys who play instruments, right? You guys play guitar, bass, violin, weird stuff, modular you're turning stuff, right? Like it's all about getting physical with the, like getting connected with the thing in a physical way. Verb. Right, clipping a bit. Right, nice chords. And we have access to this right away, right? Which is so cool. And like, let's say you wanted to add some effects. Like maybe we want, I don't know, let's add a MIDI effect, arpeggiator. Why not? Let's see what happens. Sync rate. A 12th sync rate, gate, offset, style, transposition. And then you can like, whatever. You can, you know what I mean? Let's say you don't know any scales. Like let's, Dorian mode. Dish. I could just lay my hand here. Right? Maybe not a great part, but it's in key. Cool. And then maybe we don't want just one note. Maybe we want movement. Right? And then let's go back to our macros, and then let's turn down this verb. And like, let's say we want to control that, right? Maybe we don't want the arpeggiator on all the time, but we want to be able to turn it on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and map this to macro 6. So now 6 is like on, and then halfway it's off. So you see how this turns on and off? Super simple. So there's our normal chord, and then device on. So now we can like add arpeggiator. And then maybe we want another one that changes. Let's turn it back on. Maybe we want something that changes the style, right? So let's map this to 7. Here's the style. There you go. And there you go. So now we have a couple more macros. That's enough for an instrument. And just to keep things simple, what time is it now? Yeah, we got some time. Yeah, I'm going to find a drum kit. All right, and find a couple instruments. So here's like our, let's call it a melody. All right, rename. Mellow. Cool. And let's get, I have some cool drum kits here that we'll just pick one. Trumpet plucker. All right. Let's see what trumpet plucker has in store for us today. Boom, boom, boom. Let's see what we got. See some cool samples on this drum kit, that's for shizzle. The first thing I can tell though is if we picked the scale Dorian, these are probably going to clash, but there could be a cool combo. So I'm just going to roll with it. But what I want is I'm going to group this into, again, an instrument rack so we can get some macros going. Got to have those macros. And then go back to the instrument. And I might throw an effect on it. So let me collapse this. This is a little bit much. I don't need to see all the guts, you know what I'm saying? Whoa. Okay, and then let's throw on just a filter. Good old filter. So again, the whole idea of the first phase is like just clarifying stuff. So I'm gonna get a drum kit, get some vibes, right? I didn't really set an intention, but we'll cheat for this time. Just use it for demo. All right, so let's go to filter. Maybe let's go to just an auto filter and pop it on. We want the whole thing. Boom. I think so that's going to be the whole kit. Cool, so let's test it. And I went up an octave somehow. There we go. Where's the filter? Sick. So what we're going to do is map this to 1. Boom. All right, so now if I go to the main thing, right? Just a simple filter. Let's add I love delays on percussive stuff because it can like create parts with in a really cool way. Modulated delay. And I'm just using presets, but you can like design all this stuff, right? But for now, you can just use presets, nothing wrong. Unpredictable spring. I usually go with the most hilarious names. Analog collapse. Let's do that. Pop it on the end. That's cool, but I want a faster rhythm. I want like, yeah. That's cool. Maybe 16th dotted. Yeah, cool. All right, cool with that. So I'm going to go ahead and map the on to a macro. I think I got to throw it in here to be able to do that. Boom. All right. Boom. Macro 2. And then we can actually change the time. These are synced, so we just have to map one of these. And then the cool thing with delay, if you change like the time while you're playing, you get cool pitch. You can get some trippy stuff. And I don't know, let's add, there's actually some really cool stuff. So if you guys use Ableton, really cool stuff to look at in here. And we go into, where is it? No, effects. I gotta remember what it is. Utilities, audio effect rack. Look at all this stuff. Okay, so in audio effect rack, it's like a macro rack of stuff that you can throw on things, right? So let's say we want modulation and rhythmic. Let's see with this glitchy pants. Done. Throw it on here. So instead of doing it manually, now we have all this other stuff that we can play with as well, right? All right, so let's throw it in here. Actually, let's go with Beat Shaper and put it in front. Hopefully this doesn't eclipse our other stuff. Whoop. Oh. Right, just like that, we got a bunch of cool stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and map this. So I want I want this to be part of this group. So cool, we got some stuff there. I kind of want a phaser. Modulator? Nope. Where are our phasers, bro? Here we go. Boom. Phaser Particle Alliance. Just because of the name. So I'm going to throw this back here. And do the dry wet to macro. Where are we at? 4. Okay. I think I have an instrument rack and inside an instrument rack. I confused myself. Too many things, man. There we go. Macro 4. Okay, so now on our main thing, we got a filter. Nice sub low bass. We have this delay. We have the division of the delay, and then we have this phaser. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave it off for now. And now we have some stuff. So let's call this rhythm. Boom. And you can obviously spend more time doing this. I'm just doing like, we got stuff. Let's do it. Bass. All right, so let's find a bass sound. Do 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 do. I actually really like the bass sounds in Equator 2, believe it or not. So we're gonna find it there. All right, I'm gonna do green. No, what I'm gonna do? Melody, air, bass, water, blue, rhythm, green for earth. We're going hardcore in the elements, my friends. Let me know if you want to know why. Why on earth would you name these elements? Base water. Rhythm earth. Mellow air. Nice. It's like playing Magic. Okay, so let's go over here. Bass. Let's find a bass sound. Let's bring up Equator 2. I got to remember to switch on to the screen that I'm actually like looking at. Mental note for future live streams. Bring people with you. So, bass. I'm just going to go from hilarious names again. Bong bounce bass. Ooh, clicky sub sausage bass. Ignore warnings, please. Kind of like that. It's like funky. Interesting. What's this other one? Love how you can express this differently. Cool. Sounds good to me. So I'm just going to map these macros. Boom. Open up any third-party plugin you want to map macros to. That little tiny arrow, this little tiny thing you have to know. Configure in Ableton anyway. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we have 5 effects. Good. We're going to group this into its own like instrument rack. Open up the macros, and then we can map each of these to their corresponding macros. The whole reason to do that is so that you have knobs that actually move these parameters. Just like a real instrument, right? You got knobs that change the thing. Because you want your studio to be an instrument, right? You don't want it just to be a bunch of stuff. You want to play your thing, play your studio. So I'm just going to rename these so I actually know what they are. Yes. So the first one is attack. I'm just going to do that. Tab. Tone. Whatever that means. Blitz. Room. And excuse me. Take a sip of this stevia. If you like a carbonated, like tasty beverage that has no sugar and doesn't like destroy your body, check it out. Stevia. So macro 5, vibrato. Boom. Cool. Now I got some stuff, right? So if we go here, I got some stuff to play with, right? Fades in or direct attack. That's useful. Tone. Ooh, that's a cool reverb on the bass. Vibrato, cool. All right, bass water, cool. And dynamics. Let's throw on. I like to like throw a wild card. So I'm going to plugins. The secret tool for where art thou? Plugin boutique. Scalar 2. So I know a decent amount of music theory, like some cool minor 7s, major 7. sus chords, up half step. And I actually only have I have this Dorian mode thing on, but I do know the Dorian mode. Cool vibe, but I have a scale where any note I hit will be in that scale. So if you don't really know the music theory stuff, like, you can use tools like this to help. And I know some of it, and I still use tools like this. But for now, I'm just going to turn off this effect. I'm going to make sure that we're in C Dorian. And we're going to open Scalar. And Scalar is really fun. It's kind of like almost like a sequencer, but it's also a super powerful music theory tool to learn and both create stuff, right? So let's go scales. I'm going to make sure I'm in C. Okay, C, Dorian. So I chose this scale. It gives you some vibes. Jazzy, bluesy, rocky, sophisticated. Cool, that's a vibe. And we can find chords, variations, and modulations that are in this key, right? So let's go with, start on like 4. I love the 4 chord. Right? You can like play these. I kind of like these two. Kind of uplifting, right? sus4. I'm going to bring in the 11. That's not what I wanted. Back to main. I want the... But I like that 9. But we could do the 9. Let's go 4, 6, 5. That's a good progression. And diminished flat 9. That's pretty spicy. That's pretty nice. The 6 chord in Dorian is diminished, which is pretty spicy. Let's go to the dominant. Maybe we can find the sus 9 here. And then finish on the rune. Ooh, 11. All right, so this is where you can cheat mode for sure. So I can play these chords just with one key. So if I switch my hands here, just by playing the major scale, but I can still play it. So I could play chords and melodies. Right, it's kind of cheating, but I like it. Stuff like that. Cool, right? So now we have a cool instrument that has like sequence features, and you can do all sorts of cool performing stuff with this too. We won't get into that. Save that for another time. But we can change the instrument here. Kind of want something like fun, like more energy. Cool. See, very jazzy vibe, and we're just in one mode, like we're in one scale, which is cool. Don't know about this sound though. Let's just cycle between some of them. Kind of like that vibe. Cool. Okay, we're going to make this red. We're going to keep our theme with the 4 elements. Dine. And then fire. Fun stuff. And I like to keep these white and then this black. Boom. That's just how I like it. Cool. So now we got like, if I go to my, yeah, we're at my hands, like really quick, got some drums with some macros, right? We got some bass. We're aiming for C Dorian. So C Dorian, actually, all you're doing is taking your C major, all the white keys. So this is like set up like a piano. So the white keys, the white pads are white keys. And all you do is take this major third, flatten it to this minor third instead of, right? So now it's, and then the next thing you do is flatten the 7. So you're taking these 2 notes and you're moving them down a step. So you, quick little lesson on Dorian, one of my favorite modes. Cool. So now we have like some stuff to play with, right? We could add some macros to this. So maybe we want like some crazy delay, because I love delay. So let's find the audio effect. Sure, delay and color, or delay and loop. Let's try something different, like grain delay. 5, sure. It kind of messes with the chord tones, doesn't it? Maybe we'll get something a little bit more straight. Ambience, clean delay, 8-dot ball. Cool. And I'm going to group these together again. Command G for Ableton users out there. Open up those macros. And then I'm going to map this to 1, the on-off. Because again, I don't want the delay all the time. It sounds cool by itself. Right, and just playing with some of this stuff, it gets you excited. Cool. Yeah, let's maybe throw in a couple other effects. Actually, different idea. I'm gonna ungroup this. Delete this guy. Boom. I want it to ungroup. Shift to Command G. Ungroup. There we go. Okay, I want to use one of those other things. Audio effects. Utilities. Audio effect rack. Modulation and rhythmic. Experimental. Spatial. Cosmic voice. There you go. You can control the whole. Cool. All right, now we have some macros and some stuff. Another fun thing we can do, a cool trick I like to do once in a while. Let's go to plugins, Tornado. Okay, so that's Sugar Bytes Audio. Remember the name. No, it's Sugar Bytes Audio. Tornado. Plop it on the master. Grab this thing, device lock. Open it up. Roll the dice. I don't even care. And then, boom, configure. These 8 knobs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Done. You know the trick. Command G, sorry. I know my alphabet. I swear. And there we go. Now we can map these. 1, 2. It would be cool if you could cascade control maps. That would be a pretty nerdy request. Just be like 1 to 8, 1 to 8. But we got it. We got this. And what I'm doing here is I've put 8 effects on the master that are controlled by this. At least they should be. Oh, this one. There we go. So now these are controlling 8 effects on the master. So as I'm like playing around, oh, I wanted this to lock, bro. There we go. What do you guys think of that for a beat? With some little pauses. So what's the tempo of that? So I'm just going to hit play. And we're going to stop this from auto playing. Edit main settings. DAW sync off. Thank you very much. Back here. All right, now we should just hear the metronome. We got an idea. I already forgot it. I think that's what it was. Oh, that's a weird timing. Let's see if I can actually nail this. I think it'd be way slower. Got you go. Get down. Why is that so tough? No, I need 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Oh, I'm I know what I'm doing, guys. I was like just tapping the metronome on and off button. There we go. I think I go a little fast too. Yeah. $90 or so. Cool. I actually prefer it a little slower. Okay, so let's actually record some clips. So my goal here is to not be editing stuff. All right, we're gonna transition stages. 89 BPM. All right, let's do it. I've never understood the 0.1 decibel of BPM. Matthias, thanks for the suggestion. Let's do it. Okay. I might actually have to take that again, dudes. Not cool. I'm actually just going to record a bunch and then pick the best. So let's do that. 2, 2. Okay, now we're going to turn off that stupid annoying metronome. Got a timing issue. That's all good. Let's move on to bass. I'm going to have to go higher octave. I'm gonna just keep it super simple. Let's throw that in. I might only take the second half of this, to be honest, because that's gonna get on my nerves. All right, let's turn it down a little bit. Go with these weird like 6 chords. Like that chord. Cool, we got something going. See if we can get this weird ass. Oh. I love the slight out tuning. Cool beans. So I'm actually going to duplicate. Oh, what do I do? Session view. I'm going to duplicate everything if I can. Just real quick. And then we're going to add this other layer. So I'm going to start thinking of like, okay, let's not just add everything all at once. Let's go back over here. Let's record that in. There's some glitching out on the computer going. Maybe it's too much for it to handle. And I want to add a little bit more percussive stuff. Should I try these things out? Okay, I'm going to add those two weird things to the drums. So make sure that this MIDI arrange overdub button be on so we can record to that clip, right? So we hit play here. And have record. Now we're recording. And hopefully I can remember that idea. Actually, undo that. I'm just gonna add that one layer. Alright, we got something. Let's play with some knobs. So, I hope you guys like this track. Fun. Stream is still good even though the buffer was running out. Awesome to hear. Yeah, I'm really pushing my computer with like all of this live stream setups, but hopefully it's still clear. Hopefully you can hear it. Hopefully it's not too much of a hindrance to hearing it and experiencing it, but let me know because I can always play with some more latency. So one thing I'm hearing with this is like this cool, but I want to duplicate this. Let's go session. Let's just duplicate the drums, that cool layer we added, the bass. Not going to duplicate that melody. I'm going to leave this, but we're going to add some like higher just notes on this red track, the dynamics track. Cool. So let's go back to note. Let's go over here, record, enable it. Let's just jam a little bit. Let's trigger this. Okay, let's add that in, but an octave higher. What be happened, bro? I think I recorded to the wrong clip. So sometimes I'll go in here and let's edit it. So it actually plays at the beginning. Why is this so zoomed out? Jeez. Cool, so we'll do that. Then we're gonna move this clip to this scene. This one can stay. That's the longer chord progression. Cool, we got some stuff. All right, so let's see where we got. So I'm feeling like, again, so I duplicated the whole thing, I think. No, I didn't. Delete. I think you can duplicate the whole thing here. Duplicate. There we go. Now we did it. Okay, so I want to take this and this off. So I'm kind of combining all of these things together, all these phases that we talked about, but just to iterate, like, okay, now it's like, I think it would make more sense to just open with that. Right, you get the vibe. Maybe we can throw in some automation. Got some little glitches, but we got some automation. Cool. And then what I'm hearing is like drums coming in but filtered, right? So maybe we wait on the bass and we automate some filter in here. Okay, let's go to the drums. Boom. Yeah, but imagine this. Yeah. Let's do it. I want to record the automation, man. Cool. So that would be like scene 2. Cool. So let's go back over here, note mode. I feel like the drums could have a little bit more, you know, like upbeatness, like driving percussive element. Let me just stop these guys for now. I do not want both. Usually you can like select a pad. I want this thing to have the 16 velocities, but it's choosing the other pad. Oh well, we'll just pencil that in. Kind of like that rhythm, but it's like a little bit too loud. So what we're going to do is lower the volume of that sample. Where are we at? Something like that. Cool. Okay, let's try it. That's not the one I wanted. This clip. Cool, let's play it. Something more like that. Throw it in. I'll do that a little bit. There you go. Take off, repeat. Kind of like that double kick. I'm gonna throw that in. Maybe we get a different bass line, because I kind of like this by itself. So new scene. You can really hear that sample, right? Bring in the bass. There's a bass line. So it could be like another section of the whole song, right? Bring up these melody. Let's get a little jam going. Cool. Kind of like the first part of that. So I'm going to follow the kind of, what do you want to call it, pilot tone of the bass, because the bass moving up to third, going down 7. So I'm just going to like accentuate that. Right, there's the third, and then we'll do the same thing with 7. All right, see how that sounds. Whoops. Let's undo. No, I don't want. And no. So yeah, I think I messed up that first chord. 1. Change the bass. That's cool. So I have these normal triads, but I'm gonna like take the third put it in the base, right? And then for the 7 thing, do the same. So there's a 3rd in the base, and then you can go higher. That might be a little loud, but let's try that. Cool, I like that. Go ahead, hit pause, and like, I mean, like, let's say, like, this is for the sake of demo. We'll get into this deeper in later live streams, but I'm gonna wrap this one up. But all right, let's say we're here. Let's go back to the screen. I should really have one with the screen and the hands. Oh wait, I do. Oh, I just blew my own mind. Just kidding. Okay, so let's say you got something. All right, you're like, cool. I have parts. I have things. What we're gonna do is record to session. Okay, so that means we're going to record the output of these clips to arrangement view. So we're going to create an arrangement. We're going to have some fun and like play with things at the same time. All right, so let's close this and let's try it. So looks like I left an arpeggiator on. Don't even care because it sounds cool. So let's do it. What did I do? I think that some of these effects are a little bonkers. So let's check so I can actually know what I'm doing. Okay, so these two are beat repeats. Good to know. All right, let's try something. So again, so what I recorded there, oh, let's double check that that's working. So record to arrangement. So now we're recording to arrangement. Okay, so now we're just having some fun. Excuse all the clipping and stuff. It's all good. Let's keep rolling. I'm gonna trigger that other scene with the drums that are filtering in. I'm gonna turn off track 3. Cut it off, yo. Creep up the volume of this. right? Having fun. Solo some stuff. This one's like a crazy filter. Oh, you want that bass again? All right. Let's go the drums, right? That filter. Stop the bass. We're gonna go into the next scene, which is nothing. Right, brought back that chord. Aside from all the buffering errors and glitches. Whatever, let's fade it out. All right, so there's definitely like a vibe there, right? Let's stop this. So if we go over here, now we have an arrangement, okay? And now we can zoom out and like, hey, not, you know, there's some stuff in there, definitely not perfect, but now, you know, loop all this stuff, select it all. Actually name this something. I need to name. Desktop. Name this something, right? Let's call it Pyrodyne. I'm gonna call it Pyrodyne so I'll remember. Cool. And then I'm just gonna say it's a desktop. And what I would do is export this, right? And like, I don't even really remember what I did, right? Like I played with effects, I screwed up, I like turned things on and off. The whole purpose of doing that is to have something to have an opinion about later. Because I might listen to this and be like, I don't know, this doesn't do anything. Or I might listen to it and be like, yo, I want to work on this. It's got a vibe that I like. And I'm concerning myself later with that, right? So I'm going to export this, whatever, doesn't matter, MP3, desktop, right? And then I'm going to throw it inside the system, right? Like I'm going to throw it in the card and then re-listen to it at a later point in between other sessions. Yeah, modern lo-fi, the buffer running out instead of... Yeah, I'm going to use it to my strength. The buffer glitches. That's what I should call this song, the buffer glitches. So yeah, that's something that I have to work on or see if I can even manage, is like live streaming and holding all this stuff, and also playing with these things at the same time. I might have to, like you said, adjust the buffer, although there might be some delay, or I might have to use more simple instruments, because like Equator 2 uses a ton of resources, or just work with audio or something, get the guitar going. So yeah, but the whole idea is, let me go back to the screen here. Now that we got that, all right, so I can like create a new card. Pyrodyne buffer glitch. There you go. Okay, and we didn't do all this stuff, but I can hit this and then magic. Wait for it. I hope it happens. So usually usually a template pops up here. I don't know what's happening. Maybe because there's too much stuff going on my computer. I think the favorite thing I have of that tune was that weird like wolf sample in the background. Gave it like a vibe. And then the rest is just like supporting that. Yeah, I don't know if this is just dying Or what happened? Vessels of the universe. I don't know why that's open. So once this thing bounces out, again, yeah, putting it in the card. I have all these other projects I'm working on, and I'm not even gonna concern myself with this or what happened. Had some fun, did the things really quick. There we go. So now this is in here. I'm gonna link the audio in this card, so then I can just listen to it directly here. And I didn't do any of this, but I did some of this. So now all of these things, and if I want to like tell myself, like review Pyrodyne track to remind myself to actually do this, then let's say tomorrow. I'd like to give it more time. Wednesday. Okay. So now that I've done this, this is where this is really cool. If you're nerdy about this, but it keeps you on track. Now when Wednesday comes along, I can come in this workspace and then be like, oh, yeah, let's review this thing. It opens it up and it links me to the actual project that I'm talking about. Oh, back here. And then the audio will be here. I can listen to it. And this becomes super powerful when you have a ton of tracks and you're actively using this thing. I've kind of fallen off this for a while, but then you can be like, review this track, get an edit list for this track, bring this track back to flow. Like maybe here it's like, I need this to be back into flow. And then I can make a card through this to be like, do another flow session. Sorry, flow's over here. And then it'll pop up my calendar. And then all I have to remember is to look at my calendar and follow the steps. So that's super powerful for a thing. I'm going to upload the audio there. And that's kind of the general overview of this thing. So I'm going to go back to, that camera's kind of laggy. I could tell my computer's getting clobbered by the stream. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of what I intro stream. I'm glad it worked. I know there was some issues. Thanks for your patience and sticking around for hanging out with me through all the buffering glitches and my lack of sharing the right screen. But yeah, this was fun. And the goal is to continue to do these streams and talk about the system, talk to you guys, involve you guys in the process. If you guys want to like talk or collaborate and have some fun, that's the whole intention behind this. So yeah, with that said, thanks for everybody for joining, and stay tuned. I'm going to be doing these regularly during the week. I'll probably set a time. And yeah, with that said, this has been awesome, and we'll talk to you on the next stream.